Welcome back to Wellness Lenses. Today, we will take a look at childhood trauma and how it changes our lives. We're going to talk about the complicated web of feelings, behaviors, and long-lasting effects that come from things that happened to us when we were young. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand the complexities of childhood trauma, but you'll also have a better idea of how to promote healing and resilience in your life. Now, think of this video as a manual that will help you find the keys to emotional well-being. As we get to the bottom of childhood trauma, you'll find the strength to deal with its long-lasting effects. First, let's talk about what childhood trauma is. It includes things that happen to us as kids, that are too much for our ability to cope and leave us with emotional scars that we will never forget. Abuse and neglect, as well as witnessing violence or losing a loved one, can all be considered traumas. Let's look at how these things affect the brain as it grows. Trauma can change brain structure and function, particularly in regions involved in emotional regulation and stress response, according to groundbreaking research like the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. Mental health is impacted by the effects of childhood trauma as an adult. Mental illnesses like depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder can show up and make it hard to maintain healthy relationships and deal with the problems that come up in life. Now, let's talk about emotional delay, which is an important part of dealing with childhood trauma. The normal development of emotional regulation can be messed up for many people who have been through trauma. The difficulties in identifying and expressing emotions are just one example of how this emotional delay can appear. Common coping mechanisms from childhood trauma, such as dissociation and hypervigilance, play a big part in this phenomenon. A delayed emotional response can result from dissociation, a defense mechanism in which a person cuts themselves off from their thoughts, feelings, or identity. Through this survival strategy, people were able to handle difficult situations as kids. On the other hand, hypervigilance, which is characterized by a heightened sense of alertness and an intense awareness of one's surroundings, can cause a constant state of anticipation of anger, which leaves little room for the processing of emotions. Both the person who is experiencing emotional delay and the people who are helping them need to understand it. It's not a sign of weakness. Rather, it's a survival strategy that used to work. Recognizing these ways of coping is a step toward healing that helps people slowly take back their emotional experiences and make their relationships better. Although adaptive at the time, this survival mode can last into adulthood and change how people see and react to the world. Understanding this emergency state helps us see how the past and present interact in complicated ways. It also shows us how important it is to make a safe, supportive space for healing. The emergence of a deep-seated need for productivity as a coping mechanism is both fascinating and difficult for many childhood trauma survivors. People may have learned that their worth was tied to their accomplishments and adversity as they grew up in environments marked with unpredictability and adversity. As a result, a pattern develops in which being productive serves as a defense against the vulnerability that comes with being still and resting. Having goals all the time can give you a sense of control and approval, but it can also make you neglect your need to rest and recharge. A transformative realization on the healing journey can be realizing the importance of rest as a fundamental component of well-being. Breaking out of the productivity trap means realizing that rest is not a sign of weakness, but an important part of healing and taking care of yourself. Survivors of childhood trauma frequently use humor as a defense mechanism in the complex landscape of coping with the trauma. This can show up as a propensity to laugh in a way that makes past traumatic experiences seem unimportant. It's like a double-edged sword. Humor can protect you from the raw pain of old wounds, but it can also make it hard to see how deep emotional scars go. People may temporarily relieve their own discomfort or present a facade of resilience by making light of upsetting events. The adaptive nature of humor as a tool for survival is reflected in this coping strategy, which doesn't lessen the importance of the trauma. To help people find the right balance between humor and being honest about their feelings, encouraging open conversations that lead to real understanding can be very helpful. As a poignant example of how to deal with childhood trauma, the idea of sideways grief or rage stands out. Unresolved emotions from the past can reappear unexpectedly in the present, often in strange ways. When people suppress or bury traumatic experiences, like an underground river, Sideways grief or rage flows quietly below the surface until it finds an unanticipated crack to open up. It could show up as disproportionate reactions to things that don't seem to have anything to do with each other, or as a constant feeling of unhappiness. For those on the healing journey, it is essential to recognize this sideways expression of grief or rage. In order to create a more balanced and integrated present, it encourages a compassionate examination of the buried emotions, a reconnection with the authentic self, and an unintentional unraveling of the past threads. A lot of the time, traumatic events in childhood lead to specific mental problems like having a hard time with waiting games and magical thinking. Waiting for outcomes can be an anxiety-filled process due to the unpredictability of traumatic environments, which can cause deep-seated discomfort with uncertainty. People who have been through trauma may get stuck in a cycle of heightened anticipation and constant fear of potential threats. This hypersensitivity to waiting can also be linked to magical thinking, which is when you try to control the uncontrollable by giving actions or thoughts too much importance. People who want to heal need to be able to see these patterns. This will help them wait more mindfully and break down the threads of magical thinking for a more grounded and resilient mind. The good news is that we are all capable of resilience. People can break out of the cycle of trauma and start to heal with the right help and understanding. This transformative process benefits greatly from therapeutic interventions, support networks, and self-care. Just remember, knowing about childhood trauma gives us the ability to change our stories, which helps us build resilience and heal. We start the process of living a happier and healthier life by recognizing how it affects us and getting help. Thanks for coming along with me as I talk about childhood trauma. Remember that each person's path to healing is different, and that your greatest strength is your resilience. See you in the next video.